What happens when a daughter opens her late mother's diary expecting memories, and instead finds a secret that shatters everything she thought she knew? Dr. Phil held the envelope in his hand, the studio lights catching the trembling of his fingers. "Stop the tape," he said quietly. The cameras kept rolling, but the production team froze. Something was about to break open that no one, not the crew, not the audience, not even Dr. Phil himself, was prepared for. The woman in the chair had just read aloud the last entry in her mother's diary. And the truth it contained would change everything. It had started 3 months earlier. Rachel Morrison, 38, a high school teacher from Ohio, had been sorting through her late mother's belongings. Margaret Morrison had passed away suddenly from a heart attack at 67. On a rainy Tuesday, Rachel found it, a burgundy leather journal tucked beneath old photo albums. Her mother's handwriting filled every page, neat, careful loops Rachel recognized from birthday cards and grocery lists. At first, it was beautiful. Her mother's thoughts about Rachel's first day of school. Recipes. Worries about money. Rachel cried as she read, feeling her mother's presence in every word. But then she reached the entries from 1986. The year Rachel was born. And everything changed. "I don't know how to tell her," the entry read. "She'll be 3 months old tomorrow, and every time I hold her, I see him. Not Robert. Him. The man whose name I can never speak again." Rachel's hands shook as she turned the page. Her father, Robert Morrison, had died when she was 12. He'd been her hero. The man who taught her to ride a bike, who stayed up helping with math homework, who walked her down the aisle at her wedding just months before his death. "Robert doesn't know," the next entry continued. "He believes she's his. And maybe that's better. Maybe some lies are mercies. But I carry this alone, and it's killing me." Rachel stopped reading. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it. She called Dr. Phil's show the next day. Not because she wanted attention, but because she needed someone who could help her understand what she'd found. Someone who could tell her what to do with a secret that had been buried for 38 years. The Dr. Phil team moved quickly. They verified the diary, brought in handwriting experts, and scheduled Rachel for a taping within 2 weeks. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that Rachel had kept searching after that first shocking entry. And what she'd found in the later pages would stun even Dr. Phil. The studio was packed on the day of taping. Dr. Phil walked onto the stage to his usual thunderous applause, but his expression was more serious than normal. He'd read the preliminary materials. He knew this wasn't going to be a standard show about family secrets. This was about identity, grief, and the devastating weight of hidden truth. Rachel sat in the guest chair, the diary on her lap, her hands gripping it like a lifeline. She'd hardly slept in weeks. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her sister Emily sat in the audience, equally stunned by what they'd discovered. "Rachel," Dr. Phil began, settling into his chair with that characteristic forward lean that meant he was fully present. "Thank you for trusting us with your story. I know this isn't easy." "It's not," Rachel whispered. Her voice cracked immediately. "I don't even know where to start." "Start with the diary," Dr. Phil said gently. "Tell us what you found." Rachel opened to a marked page. Her hands trembled as she began to read aloud. "June 15th, 1986. Rachel smiled at me today. Really smiled. And all I could think was, she has his eyes. David's eyes. Not Robert's warm brown ones, but those piercing blue eyes that I tried so hard to forget." The studio audience gasped audibly. Dr. Phil's expression shifted, not to shock, but to deep concern. "So your mother was saying, Dr. Phil clarified, that the man who raised you, Robert Morrison, was not your biological father." "Yes," Rachel choked out. "But Dr. Phil, that's not even the worst part." Dr. Phil paused. "What do you mean?" Rachel flipped forward several pages. Her voice barely held together as she read. "March 3rd, 1987. I saw him today at the grocery store. David. After all this time, he was with his wife and their 2 children. Rachel was in the cart, reaching for Cheerios, completely unaware that her biological father was 15 feet away. "Hold on," Dr. Phil said, his voice carrying a weight that made the entire studio go silent. He turned to face the cameras directly. "What Rachel is about to share isn't just about a family secret. It's about a choice that would affect generations." Rachel's hands trembled. "Should I keep reading?" "Only if you're ready," Dr. Phil said gently. "Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead." Rachel took a shaky breath. April 18, 1989. Robert asked me today why Rachel doesn't look like him. I told him she has my mother's features. But I'm drowning in this lie because David doesn't even know Rachel exists. And more than that, David is Robert's brother. The studio erupted. Even Dr. Phil sat back, processing the magnitude. "Your biological father was your dad's brother. Your uncle." "Yes," Rachel sobbed. "My Uncle David. The man who came to Thanksgiving dinners. Who brought me birthday presents. Who hugged me at my father's funeral, knowing, or maybe not knowing, that I was his daughter." Dr. Phil stood up. The cameras kept rolling, but he signaled to his production team with a hand gesture they all recognized, "Give us space." He walked over to Rachel's chair and knelt beside it, something he almost never did on camera. The studio lights caught the emotion in his eyes as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Rachel, look at me," he said quietly. "What you've discovered is one of the most complex family situations I've encountered in all my years doing this work. Your mother carried this secret alone for her entire life. Your father, Robert, loved you as his own, whether he knew the biological truth or not. And David, we need to talk about David. He's still alive," Rachel whispered. "He lives in Florida now. He's 72 years old. And he has no idea. Do you want him to know?" Dr. Phil asked. The question hung in the air like a weight no one could lift. "I don't know," Rachel admitted. "That's why I'm here. I don't know what to do with this information. Do I tell him? Do I tell his children, my half-siblings? Do I just let it stay buried with my mother?" Dr. Phil returned to his seat, but his posture had changed. This wasn't the confident, solution-oriented Dr. Phil the audience was used to. This was a man grappling with a genuinely impossible situation. "Here's what I know," he began. "Your mother made a choice 38 years ago. Whether it was the right choice or the wrong choice isn't for us to judge. She did what she thought would protect everyone involved. She gave you a father in Robert who clearly loved you deeply. She maintained a family structure. And she carried the weight of that decision alone until the day she died. But now I have to carry it," Rachel said, her voice rising with frustration and pain. "I have to decide whether to blow up my entire family, my uncle's family, over something that happened before I was even conscious. I have to decide whether the truth is more important than everyone's peace." But Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. He looked down at the diary in Rachel's lap, then back at her face. "Rachel, you said there were more entries. What else did your mother write?" Rachel's face crumpled. "The last entry. Written just 2 months before she died." With shaking hands, she opened to the final page. The handwriting was shakier here, the lines less neat, evidence of age or maybe the emotional weight of what was being written. "November 8, 2023. Rachel read aloud. "I'm writing this because I can feel my time running out. Not death exactly, but the sense that I won't have forever to fix this. Rachel, if you're reading this, I need you to know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the burden I'm about to place on your shoulders. But there's something else you need to know about David. Something I discovered only last year, something that changes everything." Rachel stopped. She couldn't continue. Her entire body was shaking. "What did she discover?" Dr. Phil asked gently. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. "Stop," he said to the production team. Not loudly, but with absolute authority. Everyone out. Clear the studio except essential crew. Rachel needs space for this. The audience began to protest. They'd come to see a show, after all, but Dr. Phil was already walking off stage, gesturing for them to leave. His staff moved quickly, ushering people out through the exits. Within 3 minutes, the studio was nearly empty, just Rachel, Dr. Phil, 2 cameras, and a skeletal crew. When Dr. Phil returned to his seat, his entire demeanor had changed. This wasn't a TV host anymore. This was a clinical psychologist sitting with a patient in crisis. "Okay," he said softly. "It's just us now. Tell me what your mother discovered about David." Rachel wiped her eyes and found the strength to continue reading. "Last summer, I got a call from David's wife, Susan. She was crying. She told me David had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. She told me he'd been going through old papers, organizing his affairs, when he found a letter. A letter I'd written to him in 1986 and never sent. A letter that told him about Rachel." The remaining production crew exchanged shocked looks. Even they hadn't known this part. "He knew?" Dr. Phil asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "He knew," Rachel confirmed, reading further. "Susan said David broke down when he read the letter. He asked her why I'd never sent it. She had no answers. But here's what destroys me: David kept that letter. For 37 years, he kept it in a lockbox. He knew about Rachel, and he chose every single day to honor his brother's role as her father. He chose silence. He chose our family. And now, with Alzheimer's stealing his memories, he's forgetting. Forgetting Robert. Forgetting Rachel. Forgetting the sacrifice he made." Dr. Phil removed his glasses, something viewers rarely saw him do. He rubbed his eyes, processing the layers of pain and sacrifice this story contained. "So your biological father knew," he summarized. "He knew you existed. He chose not to disrupt your life or your relationship with Robert. And now he's losing his memory of that choice." "Yes," Rachel whispered. "And my mother's last words in the diary are, Rachel, if you choose to tell David who you are, do it soon. Before Alzheimer's takes him completely. Give him the chance to know you consciously chose to reach out. Give him that gift." But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Rachel, before this taping, our team did something. With your permission, which you gave us in pre-production, we contacted David's family." Rachel's eyes widened in shock. "What? You didn't tell me." "We didn't tell you," Dr. Phil interrupted gently. "Because we wanted to see if there was anything there. We didn't want to give you false hope. But Rachel, David wants to meet you." The words hung in the air like a miracle. "He what?" Rachel gasped. "Susan, David's wife, reached out to us after we contacted her. She said David has good days and bad days. But on his good days he talks about you. He asks about the daughter he never met. He wonders if you hate him for staying silent. He wonders if it's too late." Dr. Phil unfolded the paper in his hands. "This is a letter from Susan. She wants you to know that David carried the weight of that decision for 37 years. He watched you grow up from a distance, through Christmas cards your mother sent, through updates at family gatherings. He knew your graduation date, your wedding day, your mother's funeral. He was always watching, always caring, always wondering if he'd made the right choice." Rachel was sobbing uncontrollably now. But they weren't tears of pain, they were tears of release. "Can I meet him?" she asked through the tears. "Before it's too late?" "Susan is backstage right now," Dr. Phil said. And for the first time in the entire episode, he smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. "She flew here with David. They're waiting for you." The studio doors opened, and an elderly couple walked in. David was tall but stooped with age, his white hair thin, his movements careful. Susan guided him by the arm. When he saw Rachel, something in his faded blue eyes, Those same piercing blue eyes Rachel saw in the mirror every day, sparked with recognition. "Rachel?" he said, his voice shaking. "Is that Rachel?" Rachel stood, nearly collapsing from the weight of the moment. Dr. Phil steadied her, then gently guided her forward. David took 3 trembling steps toward his daughter, the child he'd known about for 37 years but never acknowledged. When they were face to face, he raised a shaking hand and touched her cheek. "You have your mother's smile," he whispered. "But you have my eyes." Rachel and David embraced for the first time. The few crew members still in the studio were crying. Even the hardened camera operators, who'd filmed thousands of emotional moments, wiped tears from their faces. Dr. Phil stepped back, giving them space. He turned to face the one camera still rolling and spoke directly to the home audience. "Sometimes families are defined not by blood, but by sacrifice. Robert Morrison raised Rachel with love, never knowing, or perhaps knowing and choosing love anyway. David Morrison stayed silent for decades, honoring his brother's role as Rachel's father. And Margaret Morrison carried this secret alone, protecting everyone she loved at the cost of her own peace. This family chose each other over and over again, even in silence. That's what makes a family." Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. After the cameras stopped rolling, Dr. Phil stayed. He sat with Rachel, David, and Susan for over an hour, arranging DNA testing, therapy resources, and connections with Alzheimer's specialists. But more than practical help, Dr. Phil gave them validation. He told Rachel her search for truth was brave. He told David his silence was love. He told Susan that facilitating this meeting honored family loyalty. 3 months later, Rachel sent Dr. Phil an update. David's condition had declined, but in lucid moments, he and Rachel had bonded. On one clear afternoon, he told her everything about 1985, about the letter, about watching her grow up from a distance. "Your dad, Robert, was the best man I ever knew," David said. "He forgave me for things he didn't even know I'd done. How could I destroy him like that?" Rachel finally understood the impossible position David had been in. The diary now sits in a memory box in Rachel's home. On the 1-year anniversary of finding it, Rachel wrote her own entry. "Mom, I understand now. You protected us all. You gave me a father who loved me completely. You carried this alone so we could be free. Thank you. I forgive you." Dr. Phil's final words became Rachel's mantra. Sometimes the greatest love isn't visible. It's the love that sacrifices in silence. That's the love this family showed for 37 years. This is the legacy of Margaret Morrison's diary, not secrets, but sacrifice. Not lies, but love. Not betrayal, but the truth that families are built on choices, some visible, some hidden, all motivated by fierce love. And sometimes, that's all any of us can do.